either through stunning subtle CGI or stellar cutting in the editing room. Next to nobody outside of the crew working on the juggernaut Marvel franchise were aware that they were being ingeniously duped in the slightest during these particular MCU scenes. Until now! Gareth here from WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 MCU scenes you didn't realise were tricking you. Number 10. Vision isn't purple in those black and white scenes. WandaVision. The folks behind Marvel's first ever Disney Plus series by the name of WandaVision went to some rather extreme lengths in order to create a production that was as era appropriate as possible, during the sequences paying homage to very specific eras in sitcom history, something that will be touched on again before the end of this list. In particular, the moments that took place in the black and white world of the 50s required a rather significant change to Paul Bettany's process of becoming good old Viz. Instead of being painted in his typical purple for the scenes involving the vibranium leading lights playing Happy Families with Elizabeth Olsen's Wanda Maximoff, the team forging the hit show had to alter their plans upon realizing that purple didn't exactly translate all too well in black and white. So with blue looking far better in grayscale, Bettany donned a noticeably different shade during the shooting of those earlier moments in the series. Although you'd be forgiven for assuming all was well in purple upon taking in the loving couple's first dances in front of a legitimately live TV audience. Number 9. Thor's sleeves were added in post. Avengers Infinity War. Thor's shocking, in more ways than one, arrival late in the Battle of Wakanda Day was enough to leave most passionate MCU supporters in need of a bit of a lie down. But in the thick of this electric reinforcement actually came a subtle piece of trickery that next to no one understandably caught during the action itself. In a move that no doubt left Chris Hemsworth wondering why he bothered putting himself through his usual array of relentless workouts in order to get in God of Thunder shape for the flick, the Russo brothers actually opted to cover up the Australian's bulging biceps digitally in post-production. Behind-the-scenes shots of the Infinity War shoot very much showcased the Thor actor strutting around with his guns out, en route to missing Thanos' head. But either due to not being that impressed by the practical alternative costume sleeves, or feeling that Hemsworth's bare godly arms just weren't right for that particular moment, the decision was ultimately made to subtly lace a CGI sleeve via red dots on his limbs over these parts of his god bod. Number 8. A claustrophobic bath machine was behind that bus scene. Shang-Chi. While next to no one genuinely believes Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings director Destin Daniel Cretton actually sent a chaotic bus flying down a San Francisco road with a bunch of gifted actors on board, the truth behind what actually went into the creation of that instantly iconic public transport showdown will still likely catch most MCU fans off guard. On top of using a touch of CGI to pull off the finished article, a very real bus was actually sent hurtling into some legit vehicles on the street for certain moments seen in the sequence, specifically when the bus comes screeching to a halt thanks to its collision with some unfortunate sports cars. Also, Cretton opted to have 2 bus rigs built to recreate the vehicle's twisting and jarring movements whilst the actors and stunt people crafted the compelling fight sequence. And with one of said artificial arenas being suspended 20 feet in the air in order to replicate the bus's steep drops down the hills of San Fran, Cretton was also quick to note just how tenacious his stars were when shooting this sequence, claiming he was taken aback by how they were able to consistently give believable performances whilst aboard the, as he put it, claustrophobic bath machine that led to more than a few bouts of motion sickness. Number 7. Laura Haddock recorded Peter Quill's mom letter in the back of a car. Guardians of the Galaxy. Despite the fact that Marvel's frequent jaw-dropping, out-of-this-world offerings boast some of the most eye-watering budgets currently found occupying the movie business, that still hasn't stopped some of the creators from cutting a few corners and thinking outside the box en route to delivering some of the franchise's most impactful moments. Take the beat that sees Chris Pratt's Peter Quill emotionally unpack the gift his late mother Meredith gave her boy in the closing stages of Guardians of the Galaxy. Instead of having Laura Haddock deliver her heartbreaking words to her son via letter in a lavish recording studio, James Gunn would later reveal in some live Facebook commentary on the film that he was actually sat next to the British actor in a car when she recorded this emotional monologue. Going further, the Guardians director would also admit to being moved to tears during Haddock's performance, and somewhat relieved when it became clear that they wouldn't have to redo the speech later down the road, with Gunn claiming the perfect delivery you hear in the finished film was in fact those lines read in a car on a set in London. Number 6. Wires were used for Wanda's floating trick, WandaVision. The already noted 50s setting of the first WandaVision episode of this surreal slice of dramedy helped influence one of the most convincing elements the show had to offer. Instead of entirely falling back on the tried and tested tool of CGI when it came time to have Wanda manipulate the various ingredients and utensils she was using in her attempts to make dinner for Vision's boss, the VFX team behind the show opted for a more practical approach. Wires were used to suspend the likes of the pots and pans seen floating during film before a live studio audience, as a respectful homage to the way this sort of effect would have been achieved back in the day. The team did use a little bit of digital tinkering, however, to erase the visual of the wires themselves from the end result and float the odd object that couldn't be raised via wires. But for the most part, what you see hovering before you was majorly achieved through techniques that have been hanging around for decades. Thank you. Number 5, there's a reason Chris Evans' face looks odd in the shawarma scene. Avengers Assemble. Those dedicated to all things Marvel Studios had actually been exposed to a bearded Cap long before the game-changing events of Avengers Infinity War as it goes. As revealed a little later down the road, Evans' commitments to the Snowpiercer flick around the time of eventually shooting Avengers Assemble's post-credit shawarma snacking sequence meant that he wasn't able to rid his face of the hair it was sporting in that moment. So instead of going full Henry Cavill and digitally covering up the beard, a more practical option was settled on that saw Evans having to don special effects skin makeup, which executive producer Jeremy Latcham would go on record to note looked terrible by the time it was finished. Ever wonder why Cap is seen covering his face throughout much of this fast food munching? Well, that's because he was specifically asked to lean on his dodgy looking mug as a way of masking this botched cover job. Number 4, an injured RDJ was swapped out for digital Tony Stark, Iron Man 3. It's safe to say that Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark has found himself at the center of some of the most impressive CGI wizardry the MCU has ever pumped into existence over the years. However, arguably the most impressive and almost completely unnoticeable use of digital tinkering came in the form of Stark's appearance in the closing stages of the final solo Iron Man feature. With RDJ being genuinely injured on set, damaging his ankle on the shoot, the VFX team were forced to think on their feet in order to ensure the film was released on time. So instead of pausing production entirely whilst the star recovered, an utterly convincing digital alternative was landed on when it came time to shoot the film's final scene. With the feature's VFX supervisor Chris Townsend eventually telling IGN, "We were able to reconstruct RDJ as Tony Stark on set, with the help of a body double and the facial captures we'd collected afterwards." And it's safe to say the final product more than fooled folks into thinking the real deal Downey was along for this movie-ending ride. Number 3, Captain America's 2012 mask wasn't actually there. Avengers Endgame. As seen time and time again throughout the Russo brothers' Infinity Saga conclusion by the name of Avengers Endgame, the dynamic duo were all too happy to lace fully digital costumes onto their live-action performers in post-production on a number of occasions, and the outstanding end results speak for themselves. One such case comes in the form of Chris Evans' Captain America duking it out with his 2012 variant during the flick's time heist, with the past Cap being spotted wearing his trademark mask as he collided with future Steve Rogers. Only that helmet wasn't actually a part of the original shoot. 2012 Cap's headwear was only added in the wake of test audiences being a tad confused over which ass of America was which in the fight. But you'd very much be forgiven for assuming Evans sported a legit cowl when duking it out with a stunt double version of himself during the shooting of this particular all-cap showdown. Number 2, some actors didn't ever meet on set, despite being in scenes together. Multiverse of Madness. If the feature in question wasn't strange enough, it turns out that one of perhaps the most surreal set of scenes Sam Raimi's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness eventually served up to audiences was actually far more bizarre than you could have ever imagined. As revealed by the likes of Elizabeth Olsen and Anson Mount, playing Wanda Maximoff and Black Bolt in the flick respectively, it turns out that a few key surprise players weren't actually on set together when it came time to create a number of Illuminati moments. In Mount's words to Esquire later down the road, Patrick Stewart and John Krasinski actually didn't join him in the filming of the reshoots that his Black Bolt was introduced in, explaining that was a very interesting shoot because my role came up in the reshoots. As you can imagine, several of the actors were quite busy. Patrick was not there, Chiwetel Ejiofor was not there, Krasinski's contract wasn't even done, he wasn't there, and Olsen would note something similar in a Vanity Fair interview too, claiming, "I've never met that man, I've met his wife," when faced with a photo of the MCU Mr. Fantastic actor during a lie detector test. It turns out there was a great many super substitutes on set when it came to the creation of this corner of the multiverse. Number 1, Willem Dafoe did most of his own stunts. Spider-Man No Way Home. Willem Dafoe quite rightly made many a headline a few months back when the Green Goblin legend revealed how hellbent he was on genuinely performing as much of his action as possible throughout the MCU's third Spider-Man feature, No Way Home. And while it's clear that Dafoe was very much at the center of much of the hard-hitting Goblin showdowns with Tom Holland's iteration of the Wall Crawler, there were a few moments that appeared to have relied on some understandable CGI assistance in order to ensure both actors weren't damaged beyond repair in the shooting of the Kondo fight sequence stunts in particular. As revealed in the film's special features vignette on the shooting of said showdown, both Holland and Dafoe were game to do as much as possible in the brutal battle. Yet for the beats such as Spidey being thumped out of a window before latching onto his nemesis with a web and being yanked back into the fight, Dafoe's face appears to have been digitally placed onto a stunt double stand-in. That being said, that's very much the 67-year-old Screen veteran getting his hands dirty, as Holland's Spidey punches a sickening and spine-chilling cackle out of the icon not long after. What a goblin! And that's our list. Know of any other MCU scenes you didn't realize were tricking you? Let us know all about them in the comment section right down below, and do not forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you're at it. Also, be sure to head on over to whatculture.com and find some more awesome articles just like the one this video you're watching right now is based on. I've been Gareth from whatculture.com. Thank you as always for clicking on this video today. I hope to see you very, very soon, but in the meantime, be good to yourself. Bye bye!